All right. Wonderful. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending today's session. Today we have Carly Miller that's going to present on parent literacy. Along with that, we have our interpreter, Julie, that's going to go ahead and provide us some information. I did promote those of you that are on the webinar. I promoted you to attendees. That way you can go ahead and unmute yourself to provide a question if you'd like to. We have a small group, so we just want to make it more informal and just to give you that opportunity to ask questions. So with that, I'm going to let Julie do our interpreting announcement and then give it to Carly. Thank you very much.
Hi, for those who need interpretation in English, on your computer, if you're on your computer at the bottom, you should see the, once Ms. Viviana turns on the interpretation feature, you should see a globe icon. Just go click in there and it should prompt you to use interpretation and choose the language of your preference. Even if you speak English, you need to choose a language so you can hear all the information and questions if there are any. If you're on a smartphone, you should see on the somewhere on your screen on one of the corners 3 dots, and then you click on the 3 dots and then it'll prompt you for language interpretation, and same thing, to choose the language of your preference and just confirm. Okay. Y hola, en español estamos ofreciendo la reunión en español. Si necesita accesar la interpretación en su computadora, en la parte de abajo va a aparecer el icono de un globo o mapamundi. Le hace clic ahí, le va a dar la instrucción para seguir la interpretación. En este caso sería en español, puede escoger español. Y si está en su teléfono inteligente, en su pantalla también va a haber 3 puntitos en alguna de las esquinas y le hace clic ahí en los puntitos, o a veces dice more more, y le hace clic ahí y ahí le va a dar la instrucción para que siga el idioma de su preferencia. En este caso sería español. Solo hágale clic ahí, confirma y ya debe poder escuchar la instrucción del día de hoy en español. Gracias.
Wonderful. So we'll go ahead and start with that, clicking that interpretation piece on. Thank you so much. And with that, Carly Miller, thank you.
Welcome, everybody. It's great to see you this morning. At some point, we'll do some of these in person or get to see more of you. We are here to talk about kindergarten through 2nd grade. This is our parent literacy series number 2. We had one a few weeks back, actually almost a month back, that was focused on reading. So today we're going to talk about writing and really touch back to that reciprocal process of reading and writing. Again, I am Carly Miller. I am a district academic specialist for Napa Valley Unified. What that essentially means is I'm a teacher out of the classroom who supports not only teachers, but also parents in understanding literacy. So that's what we're here today to talk about. So if you, I know some of you have been promoted, if you can type in the Q&A box, just one word or phrase that comes to mind when you think of having to write. Writing is a process that can be challenging. It's more of a creative process sometimes. So one thing that you think about when you think about writing.
And you can go ahead and write those into the Q&A since the chat box is not available. You could just go ahead and go into your Q&A and provide Carly that info. And Carly, I don't see anything yet.
Okay.
Q&A.
Okay, that's fine. Sometimes we try to make these more interactive, but I realize our current medium is sort of hard sometimes with a webinar. So this is really to get our mind focused on writing and talk about how our kiddos are learning how to write. So some of the things that can come to mind with writing, oftentimes this picture sort of illustrates it. Our students get frustrated, and we can get frustrated as adults. adults, you know, when we focus on things like words being spelled wrong, or things not looking right, or printing not looking great, or whatever it may be. And much of our year this year, our writing has been taking place on our computers, just given our current circumstances. So writing is sort of vast, and it's a challenge to teach, and it's also a challenge for our students to sort of learn, and how you can support your students at home with this work. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So here are our outcomes for our time together. We're going to understand the connection between reading and writing. Last time we talked a lot about reading, basically the fundamentals that your children are learning right now, how they're learning to read, and the process that looks like at school, and how you can support that at home. And now we're going to talk about the writing connection, because much of what they do with their writing shows where they are with their reading. So that process is very connected. The second thing we're going to talk about is the homeschool connection. So we're really going to talk about what we do at school and how we teach around writing, and then how you can support your child at home. Some basic things that you can do to just sort of cultivate and keep that learning moving forward. And then lastly, we want to give you a few ideas of how you can support, specific ideas how you could support your children's writing, possibly as we look now over the summer, and reinforce that writing again next fall as they move into the next grade. This is a reminder, this is what we looked at for the reading progression. When we think about our early grades, what we're really focused on doing is getting our students to learn how to read, right? Those are the basics that we need. We need to get them to learn how to read. And then when we move into that step 2, as they go into 3rd grade, it becomes a lot. They actually have started to learn the code. They've learned how to, you know, do some basic decoding and reading. And now they're really having to use that skill to learn content. So that's where our upper grade teachers, many of them, are giving your students some pretty hard text, and they're having to practice reading that on their own and understand what it is saying. So really this first step that we're doing in the primary grades, which your children are in, I assume if you are here, are really beginning to look at the sounds, and how sounds are hooked to letters, and how letters become words, and how words become sentences, and then how sentences become paragraphs. So that progression through the reading process. So that's just a quick reminder about the steps. And then as we move obviously into middle school and beyond, those are the basic skills. Reading and writing are the basic skills they need in order to take on more content through the grades, maybe going into history, social studies, and science, and potentially art and music, and all these other pieces that we teach. All right. So this is a framework for reading. I wanted to show this again. This really, these are kind of the 2 big components of reading. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit as we think about writing for our kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade students. So when we look at this left side here, the decoding piece, that is the basic sounding out of words that your student is doing. And when they're doing that, they're putting that together in their head. But when they're writing, they're doing a similar process. They're stretching and sounding out words. And I have some good examples of what that looks like. So you can kind of help your student do that. But this is a reminder that as they are, you know, putting it together in their brain so they can stretch and say those words, they're also beginning to do that with writing. And when they do that with writing, they really internalize it more. We as adults, you know, when you're taking notes potentially right now, or anything, any kind of trainings you may go to, or meetings you go to, you're taking notes, and that writing process really solidifies those sounds and everything. All right. And then there's the comprehension side of the house. So that's when you're reading aloud to your child, this is the greatest piece where they don't have to do the hard work. You're asking them questions, and they're sort of, you know, building the story in their mind, visualizing that. So it's important that we have both of those. All right. This is a quote that comes from Louisa Moats. Anything that is going to cause trouble with a child's reading will show up automatically in the child's spelling and writing. This is Louisa Moats. She's kind of a early literacy guru, very well known in the United States. And what she is saying here essentially is that when our students write, when you see your kids write, it's very much showing you and us as teachers where your child is in understanding that reading continuum and moving toward being able to read words fluently. So this is as we talk with teachers about what this looks like in the classroom, this is a big one, because you can see that this child right here has some good understandings of the sounds and is able to put them together into words. So this is a big piece and a big reminder for us as we think about supporting our kids at home with writing. Okay, so this is the early writing progression. You may have seen these during conferences. Usually K-1, 2 teachers share something that looks like this. And it's just a reminder of how our students learn how to write. And what we really do is they begin with pictures, right? Many of your kids like to draw, with crayons or watercolors or whatever they're doing, but they're doodling and they're figuring out their shapes and they're adding rainbows and grass and all sorts of things for those pictures. And then the next thing they're going to begin to do is scribble. You may have seen your students start to scribble. Oftentimes my little guy would get a book or a notepad and just start pretending writing. They're mimicking what they see you doing, what the world out there is doing. And that's their way of beginning to say, I'm writing, I'm putting these things on a paper, and I know they're meaningful. And sometimes they'll even read it to you, even though you can't read it, they'll read it out loud. They'll give you a whole story that comes straight from their brain. Then we move into these random letters. As we begin to teach in kindergarten and first grade, as we begin to teach letter sounds and letter names, they will start to randomize them. So they'll say, ooh, I know these are all these letters I've just learned. And they start just putting them on a page. And you can see here, there's no rhyme or reason. It just they're just flowing with it. They're practicing it. They're feeling confident with it. And then we begin to move into random letters still, but some initial consonants. So they might know that dog begins with D. So they're going to go ahead and put a D in there. And they might be able to tell you what this says because in their mind, they've crafted it that way. Then we move into initial consonants. So that is where they are saying something in their mind. They're saying, I like my bike. So they're going with the initial sounds. They know I is something we teach almost initially because it's something easy. It's a sight word. They can have it in every sentence. It's very focused on themselves, which they love to talk about their own stories. So I, and then like my bike. So those are sort of the initial sound, the consonants that you'll see starting to come in the writing. Then we progress and we start to see the initial, beginning, and end final sounds. So here they say I, and they're hearing like my. So they are hearing an I, even though we know my is spelled M-Y, but this is all the part of the progression. And then bike, b-k. So they're hearing the beginning and ending sounds. And this is a really natural progression as you see your child start to do this. And if you're not seeing them do it and they're starting to kind of get stuck, these are sort of the progressions of when, what do you hear at the end of that sound? And really pushing them to sort of have that exploration time with writing. I'm always get journals for my kids over the summer, and I don't care what you put in there, just write or draw something every day. And that really just gives them a place to play with this and have fun with this. So then you'll see the vowels start to appear. So you'll see as they understand vowels and we begin to teach the A, E, I, O, and U, the vowels, we begin with those short vowels. But then there's things like the long vowels that come in. So you'll see, I like to play with my cat. So they're starting to appear. And then we eventually see all the syllables represented. So this is where they're really stretching their sounds and beginning to do this work. My favorite dinosaur is the Stegosaurus. So you're going to start to see that all. And then eventually our pie in the sky, as we hope for at least our first and second graders, as they begin to migrate into third grade, that they are able to have multiple sentences with words and eventually correct spelling. So we'll talk a little bit about spelling because that's a big one. And as a parent, I go directly to, oh my gosh, I got to correct the spelling because it's something that you feel you need to do. But remember that this progression is very intentional and it is very purposeful in how it goes developmentally, how our students are progressing. So knowing where your child is and kind of what that next step is always a nice thing, because if your child is still just exploring with the sounds, let's try to push them a little bit further, and it'll start to come naturally as they're getting it at school. Okay, so there's two key elements in writing that we need to remember. The first is that the spelling, and it's the actual sound produced in print. So that is your pencil to your paper, and I'm going to stretch the word, and the word is cat. So I'm going to say cat. And I'm going to begin to sound it out. And I'm going to say, what's the sound that k makes? C. What's the sound that a makes? A. What's the sound that t makes? T. T. So, and then that's the basic piece, right? That we were just kind of talking about in the previous slide. But the second piece is this ideation. And this is what makes good writers, right? Is that they're generating ideas. So a lot of what we do in class, especially at the primary grades, is we think about ideas. So you guys, we just read this great story about a butterfly, and a butterfly was flying through the garden. So tell me, what's the first thing the butterfly does, so that you really start to get the kids thinking. And it's important for them to talk about their ideas first and get them out there. And then we start to organize the ideas. So what's the main thing we're talking about? A butterfly. So that's where we're going to begin our topic sentence. And then we're going to move into some details about the butterfly and what the butterfly is doing. And then we may give them some sense of closure. The butterfly flies away. It was a great day, whatever you're going to do. So two key elements with writing: one, the spelling piece, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And then two, this ideation, because we want them to come up with ideas. And sometimes they get a little stuck when they have to write them down, because that's a lot of ideas and they're still struggling with being able to sound it out. So two key ones to remember when you're looking and working with your student at home. So let's talk quickly about the reading and writing connection. Reading and writing are both centered around the same kind of knowledge and skills. So as they're reading, they're taking in information, right? And they're looking at a book, which we call an anchor. Like, this is an example of what a good writer does. So when I read a fictional story, when I read a made-up story, I can see how that author brings me in, how they make it interesting. So it really is a process of knowledge and skills. And so that is where we start to say, as we think about writers, we have some very good examples of writers, people like Eric Carle, right? That we can look at some of his beautiful picture books and we can say, The Hungry Caterpillar, how did he tell that story? And how could I tell that story, or a story about a similar animal like that? The second piece is that they're both communication processes, right? We read about things and then we write about them. But a big piece that we kind of like to also put in here, and we talk with teachers about this, is the speaking and listening part. What we're doing right now is practicing what we're going to do before we write. And really together, these two are the production of our knowledge and skills. It's how your students show us, all of us, teachers and parents, how their ideas are coming to life. So they can do that both orally and they can do it in written connection. So just remembering that they're very closely connected. So when we think about that cycle, a child reads frequently. So maybe you're reading books every night with them. They have the same favorite books they like to read, or they're beginning to read on their own a little bit. So which is a process that we talked about in our last parent series. It's a great one, and I believe it is recorded. So if you wanted to see that, there's some really good tips and tricks when you read with your child. But regardless, we're letting the words wash over them, letting them kind of lose themselves in the story. And then from there, that teaches children about the text and the structure. So, okay, guys, we're reading a little story about snakes right now, and I'm seeing pictures of snakes, and this is an informational text. It's telling me about snakes. It's telling me about their skin, where they live, what they do. All of these pieces And now that's going to give them a new idea for, well, when I write informational, when I can write about my favorite animal, the shark, then I can start to say, how did the snake people write that? And how might I do that with a shark? So really beginning to understand the structure. As a child reads, they also gain the knowledge about the world. So we can give them knowledge as parents, teachers give them knowledge, but the big piece of it comes from reading, right? I read about Australia and I understand things in Australia that I may never go, but I understand things about the world. And I'm starting to understand the animals that live in Australia, that they don't live here in the United States. Those sorts of things are giving them knowledge. And then that allows the child to transfer that knowledge into writing. So being able to take that knowledge about Australia or butterflies or snakes and bring it into their own writing. And lastly, that brings it back to them understanding their reading skills. When they see that word kangaroo, they've seen it before, they've written it maybe, and now they're able to recognize it again. So it just really solidifies their ideas as they're reading and writing together. So we have two types of writing in the primary grades. I'm going to speak to kindergarten and first grade because those are sort of the early. Second grade, we do a little bit of this, but we really start to reach into them doing more independent writing, so they are prepared for third grade. So there's two types of writing. The first is what we call interactive writing in the K-1 grades. That is where the students and teachers talk and the students and teachers write. So you'll see the example right here is they're writing a story about snow. They're talking about a setting. So they may be talking about a snowy field. So the teacher is prompting the students. They're having some discussion about that. And then the teacher may write, you can see she's written the heading, the title of the story, the title, and then she's brought a child up to tell her ideas or to write her ideas. So it's interactive in a sense that both the teacher and the student are participating in it. And the teacher is really guiding that, but they're being able to share their ideas. And the other students are watching this student and how she progresses through the writing. So that's how we begin to teach about writing, so that the students aren't just doing their own writing. This is very focused on us and how we teach writing. The second part is called shared writing. And this is if we were to go out and take a walk on the playground and see what we notice. The students are going to do the talking. They're going to say, I saw a leaf. Well, tell me about a leaf. Well, there were these little bumps. Okay, those are called veins. There's tips of the leaf. What colors are the tips of the leaf? Well, they're orange and yellow. So the teacher is drawing this and the students are feeding information to her, and she is writing, or he or she is writing, and they're writing correctly. They're saying, the students are saying, I see a big brown, orange, and yellow leaf. Describe it for me. What is it? It's dry and crispy. It feels rough. So they are giving her this information. As teachers, we begin to craft it. So what we're doing here is showing what a really good writer does. We're modeling that. So there's two reasons here. We're modeling this so that they can continue to understand. And we do this in 3 different ways. We do it with a narrative, which is like a story, which they love to write stories. We do it in informational explanatory, which is when you're writing about something, you're sharing some information about a snake or a butterfly. That's going to be that informational text. And then the last one is their opinion, writing an opinion piece. I like ice cream better than cookies, because ice cream melts and I get it on a cone. Whatever it may be, those are sort of the 3 types. And what we're doing is we're talking about it from a shared writing perspective, where they're giving me ideas and I'm helping organize it for them, modeling what that looks like as a good writer. And then the interactive writing process kind of begins to say, now you come up and tell me what that looks like, and now you write what that looks like. So those are sort of the 2 big types we talk about in primary grades with writing. The other big one that we see and we begin to do, and you may see at home, and you may have seen and from your teacher coming home from conferences and other things, are examples of your students' independent writing. So we build in as many opportunities as possible for students to practice the writing skills and actually produce their own writing. So after that, possibly that shared writing or interactive writing around snow, I might go and have the students write their own version of that. So that allows them to practice what we just modeled and did together. And so students really begin to produce their own pieces. And that's exciting, but it's also a little frustrating sometimes for kids. So as parents, that's where we have to really support the ideas they're putting on the paper and celebrate it, because it becomes a very frustrating process if we kind of focus too much on the spelling and the capitalizations and those little conventional pieces, which we'll talk about. So why are students writing so much about what they are reading? Our current program, Benchmark Advanced, that we use to teach language arts, is focused on students responding to text. So I just read a story about, I read some informational text about a butterfly. Now I need you to tell me about that. And so we're teaching them to respond to text, which we know as they progress through the grades into middle school and high school and eventually possibly college or career, there's plenty of opportunities where they're going to have to respond, maybe write an email to a boss, something like that. But we are teaching them how to take in information and respond to it. So that's really the big focus. We also know that that improves their understanding of something. So I just read Charlotte's Web out loud. I'll have them go back and talk about how Charlotte the spider has a relationship with Wilbur the pig. And what does that look like and sound like? It helps them process what they had just heard read aloud or maybe possibly read themselves. It improves their reading fluency. So as I said, as they're writing those letters and stretching them out, they're also becoming more fluent. So as they write cat, when they go and see it, their brain's going to know it because they've already practiced and processed that and solidified the sound symbol, which is the letter, relationship. Students also are able to organize their own writing. Like I said, they have an anchor for what that looks like. Now you go show me how you organize an informational text. How are you going to share information with me in a clear, concise way? So this is kind of talked a little bit about this, but there are two parts of writing that I kind of talked earlier about the spelling and then the ideation. This kind of hits at that a little bit deeper. So we call them in the upper grades, and we begin to talk to our first and second graders about this, that we have two sides. We have the content, which is what they're actually putting out there, their ideas, and the conventions. And we call them conventions, but essentially it's how they're spelling, the capitalizations, their spacing on the page, their grammar. Are they using the proper English? And does it make sense when we read it out loud? So for the content, what we're always really looking for are their ideas. Like, do you hook me? Is it interesting when they read it aloud? We like to talk about voice. Voice is it's a really hard thing to teach, but we want it to be unique. When you're hearing a student read aloud, I went to the beach. It was really fun. We want them to say, tell me about the beach. Was it windy? Was it sunny? Make me feel like I'm there. So that's really the voice piece that we love to bring in. And students light up when they can start to tell you some of those details. And then there's word choice, things like, I don't want to hear that as a reader. When I read your writing or when you're reading it out loud to me, I don't want to hear the word I like 5 times, right? I like the beach. I like the water. Like, how could we say that differently? I like the beach. The water's really cold, but I really love the warm sun, so those ideas that they're switching up and using different words. So these are sort of the things we teach around to keep it interesting from the content side. And then the conventions, this is where, as parents, it's hard for me when my child brings me a piece of paper and I think, oh gosh, this is going to be beautiful. But I immediately focus on that the I is not capitalized, or their spacing is off, or I can't read their letters. You might be able to read them, but they might be kind of crammed together. So these are the things as parents we need to sort of say, okay, not as important to worry about the conventions. I'm going to think about what I'm hearing and seeing in this beautiful story that they've written. So these are sort of the things we kind of push and pull on as teachers, where we say, if the content is there, then we'll get there on the conventions. We can practice that because we know with more and more practice, these things will start to solve themselves. But that's something we do focus on a lot in the upper grades to make sure we got to get to a place a reader is going to want to understand what you're writing and see what you're writing and be able to read it too. So those are important things. So it's the balance between the two. All right, this is a kindergarten writing sample. Just wanted to show you a little bit of what this looks like. So you can see this is common, and we're going to talk about the picture in a second. The picture is a big part of what we do to get our ideation going, our brains going on ideas. So this is what this writing sample says. Dog is best because they, I forget what this is. See, you can even, they, break. Yes. So what I want to point out here is they've taken a nice picture and they're pulling their ideas from the picture. Dog, this child has spelled correctly, right? Dog is a sight word. I have it up on my wall. They see it. They're going to write it down. Another one that's easy for them to put together. Best. You can see they don't have the eh sound in there, but they're getting the sound and they're on the road. Remember, we looked at that progression earlier. So we're not going to like spend too much time focused on that because we know they're getting there because they, and I think it's Reese, but we're working through the progression of that. All right. So it all begins with drawing. This is a big thing. If your child is at home this summer and you're wondering kind of how you could get them started and maybe, giving them that journal and having that place for them to do, we really feel strongly as teachers that it's important to have them draw a picture because this is where their ideas can come from. And when they get stuck, you can go back to the picture. So in this case, the child drew a picture of a fish and they began to label the parts of the fish. But you'll notice the fish is in some rough water here, right? And the sun is out and the sun is happy. He's got a smile on his face, right? And then we've got some other, oh no, wrong way. There we go. Got some other friends down here, possibly fishies or other people in the ocean with him. So we're going to ask them to draw pictures. We're going to ask them to provide as many details as possible. So if a child first just draws the picture of the fish, well, where does the fish live? In the ocean. So let's draw the ocean. And what's the weather outside? Is it stormy or is it sunny? What's happening? And then the second piece you're going to do is you're going to talk about the picture. So this is where you're going to really say, what's your fish doing? Like, are they swimming? Are they eating? Are they looking for someone? Where is your fish? They're in the deep part of the ocean. They're in the shallow part. They're in the ocean off Hawaii or Mexico. What color is your fish? Because we know they can be all different colors. Well, it's orange. It's like Finding Nemo. I love the clownfish, so I made him orange. You can see the child has done scales right on here, the little scales. So you can, they're really talking about the different parts of the fish. So these are details that we can ask about that they can bring into their writing. So then they need to write about the picture. And this gives them right away, what's this picture about? Let's say we're going to write a story. One day there was a fish in the ocean. It was a sunny day. So they can pull their details right out of the pictures. So if your kiddo is stuck and you're wanting them to start with something, just draw. And then sometimes kids don't want to draw very much, but it's like, draw a little more. Show me a little bit more about your picture. So really that writing needs to connect to that reading or to that drawing piece. And then they're going to read it out loud to you. And like I just showed you in the sample before, they may read something that's not even on the page because it's up here and they haven't put it down yet, but they know it's part of the story. They know that the sun is an important part of the story, that it was a sunny day. And then lastly, you're going to celebrate as much as possible. Like even if it was just a start or a place, great work, fantastic. Let's keep going with that. So these are sort of some key steps to sort of think about how you can push your kiddo forward. If they're reluctant or they don't want to write very much, drawing is a perfect place to start because they have a lot of details and information they can pull out of their drawing. All right. So things you can do at home to sort of get them started. You just read a book. You read a picture book that was one of their favorites. And you said, well, tell me what your book is mostly about. And they might just draw some pictures from the book. Who's your favorite character? Well, my favorite character was Charlotte from Charlotte's the Web. We're reading Charlotte's Web. So I'm going to draw a picture of the spider. Well, where is the spider? Well, the spider's sort of hanging up there. Well, what do you think is going to happen next? So what is that next part of the story? Tell me about your most exciting part of the story we just read. What's the most exciting piece? Or, hey, we just read this book. Let's go tell grandma and grandpa or aunt and uncle why you like the book and have them explain that a little bit. So these are sort of some ideas that you probably already talk about with them when they're reading. But when we think about how we connect it to writing, there's some good pieces here. Draw me your favorite character and then tell me more about it and label it just like that picture before. And then we can pull some details out to get further along in our writing. So some ideas of how to get them writing, maybe over the summer, getting them intrigued into this as much as possible, knowing that it's summer and they're going to want to have a brain break. But we want to create a space for your child. That could just be at the kitchen table. It could be, you probably have spaces at home you've created just given our year of hybrid learning. We need to read with them as much as possible. And I think that goes without saying, but as they want to read picture books and they want to read the same one over and over again, that's great because that's cultivating their ideas and making them think about different things and that they're not familiar with. We want to possibly keep a reflective journal. Like I said, this is a really easy thing to do. Just 99 cents. Give them a journal. Say this is your journal for the summer, and I want you to do whatever you want with it. You can draw on it. You can write in it. But as they're reflecting on their day, what was something you did that you really liked? What was something you ate that you really liked? These sorts of pieces are something easy they can do to sort of cultivate that, kind of push that writing piece forward. Provide authentic writing opportunities. Hey, we're going to go to Safeway. We're going to go ahead and make a quick list. So we need corn, and they might not be able to spell the word corn, but they can put a C for corn. Or, hey, we're going to make our favorite recipe. Let's try to write down some of the steps of the recipe. What's the first step in the recipe? Be a writing role model yourself. They watch a lot of what we do, and it may be a lot on the computer these days, but they're watching what you're doing and mimicking that. So as much as you can cultivate the importance and talk about the importance of writing in your daily life, we'll reinforce that. Start a vocabulary notebook. This is another good one. What's a word or something they saw throughout the day that is different? I saw it could be something in your kitchen that, a spatula. Okay, well, let's sound that out. Let's add that to our list of words, spatula. Those, or it could be something when they're walking out in the park, they could have seen something that was really unique or different, or something they see every day, but a little vocabulary notebook, because that will help them start to get more words and think about writing those words and incorporating that into their writing. And then ask questions. That previous slide gave you some ideas of always asking questions and having them sort of answer them is a great way for them to think back and make those connections. And then this idea of publishing their writing. So once they've maybe done a little reflective journal and there's something kind of special they share, great idea. Let's take a picture and let's drop it in and let's do some typing, or maybe let's write another draft and we can put it up on the refrigerator or give it to grandma and grandpa or something, but really celebrating that process of writing. And it could be done in a very simple way. So those are some key ideas. There's a couple additional resources which we will post when we post these slides in this recording, I believe, or we can give access to you. There's some journal writing prompts that are fantastic. And when you think about that reflective journal this summer, there's some great ideas in here and just a place for you to start. So that was a lot of talking. I'm going to stop there and I guess open it up for questions.
And you're able to go ahead and unmute yourself. If you have a question, you can just unmute yourself as a panelist and go ahead and ask it if you'd like.
Hi.
Hi, good morning.
Thanks. That was so useful. For a child with big ideas who has trouble following through and writing down, is the journal not scaffolded necessarily? You said it's scaffolded. It has questions. There can be questions and prompts that aren't too directive, but also help them get started.
Yes. So in the journal prompts that I can link, I can drop it into the Q&A or the chat, or we can give this to you. But sometimes I like to we do it in the classroom where you do like a journal jar, and you may put little prompts or starters into a jar, and every day they just pull one out, and then you say, "Oh," and then you just have them glue it on the top of their journal and draw a picture about it. So have it be super fun and easy to start. And then you can get them to do a little bit more, like, "Ooh, tell me more about that," or, to prompt them. So it could be an idea jar or like a sentence starter jar or whatever you want it to be. But that's a great way to sort of cultivate, because they like to write about the same things usually as we do, and they get kind of stuck. But yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Myers.
I have a question.
Yes.
Hi, Ms. West. Good morning.
Oh, you're checking to me?
Yes, Ms. West.
Sorry, my volume is terrible.
No problem.
My daughter, she's a first grader, and she does a lot of talk to text through her iPad. So she resists picking up a pencil so much. And is there, obviously it's important to do, the physical writing with a pencil, but is it detrimental to have her continue? Like if she made a journal talk to text and really kind of did it in that way, is it still activating that part of her brain, or should I really just force her to use the pencil? Thank you.
I think great question. And that was kind of what I said several times throughout. I think both are important. Remember, there's that two sides. There's the ideation process, which it sounds like she's got a vivid imagination and is ready to do that. So the talk to text, and they've gotten really good this year at finding pictures and creating images, and, whether it's in Seesaw or whatever they're using. But I think the pencil and paper piece is important. We always think about, how to grab a pencil, how to write. And it doesn't have to be with a pencil. It could be a whiteboard, because sometimes that's easier. It could be, I get cornstarch and just put it into what do you call it? Like a oven tray, and they can write some letters in there. Another fun one is shaving cream. You can put the shaving cream on your table, and they can write and make letters in that, and words in that. So that tactile piece might be a place to hook her, or get her started, because this can be very frustrating, especially. But I think for fine motor skills overall, and then eventual production, you're right. And I mean, when they go into third grade, they're taking the state test, and guess what? It's like this, it's all computer. So that's something that is going to be their reality. They are these digital natives, and they're used to that. But I do think, as much as possible, having her try to bring in the pencil and practice that. And maybe that's just a journal, and maybe it's just starting with pictures, because pictures are fun and kind of easier. And then they can start to, like that picture of the fish I showed, please label some of these things for me. And then push in a little bit more, and maybe say, "Oh, can you write a sentence about that?" And maybe if she could just tell you the sentence, that's a start. And then, because you want to keep it fun, and that's always important.
Thank you, West. Thank you. Did we have any other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Hi, Ms. Harrison. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. This has been really helpful. My question is around when to correct spelling. I have a first grader, and I never know if I should correct and guide her on bigger words that I don't think she really should know. And I think it really kind of dampens the energy. So I wanted to get some guidelines on when to allow her to be wrong.
Yes. Well, you saw many of the examples we looked at were wrong. And as when I shared how we do the interactive writing, when they're doing, when we're sharing ideas and they're coming up and using the pen, oftentimes I didn't correct them, right? Because first of all, that shuts them down a little bit, right? But I think first grade, I mean, really where we start to, we're looking at next year, looking at a district writing assessment where your rising second grader will be asked to do some writing. And on our writing rubrics, our scoring rubrics, there is a part for conventions. They get a convention score, which is spelling and capitalization. So I think as you progress into second grade, toward the end of second grade is when we start to say, okay, we need to start working out some of those basic spelling errors. One, so I, as a reader, can understand it, but two, so we can start to look like we're, big second grade writers almost into third grade. So I would hesitate to do too much of that. But if you find it's the same error over and over and over again, like a sight word or something that's simple that they should know, that's probably where you could say something. But if it sounds like if it's a multisyllabic, like a bigger word, we're just happy she's stretching and sounding those sounds out for now. So I would say as you progress through second grade, maybe start to think about it. But there are kind of what we call the no excuse words, which are those sight words. Like if she's spelling what wrong, if she's spelling it WAT, then maybe you'd correct it. But I think overall, just letting them flow and feel comfortable and getting their ideas out on paper is probably the most important, especially at this age. And then second grade becomes a big year to start looking at that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Would anybody else like to ask a question? You're able to just go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like. Okay, well, at the Ms. Myers, yes.
Hi, it's me again. I have a little question. For in terms of amount of time spent writing, if every day becomes too burdensome, once a week, however long, is that a good goal?
Yes. I mean, we like to say pencil to paper as much as possible. I think if you're thinking about a normal like school year, during the school year, they're doing a lot of that writing at school. So just reinforcing that at home. But when I think about summer, you want to keep cultivating that. So so you don't want it to be drudgery, so I think less is more. If they're going to write, go through the process of writing, draw a picture, and then do that process we talked about where you're asking questions and having them pull it. And if they're doing that once a week, that's like fantastic. And then also giving them some free reign, like that have them take that journal. And some kids just want to draw words or labels or, can, start to play with it a little bit. And I think that's super important as well. So, but that process I just kind of took you through with the drawing is maybe like you say for once a week, like what's the most exciting thing we did in the last week? Or if you had just gone on a little trip or gone to, a museum or gone to the park or where, something experiential that has some nuggets and details. Those are usually the great places to say, hey, why don't you draw me a picture about that? And then we can do, and maybe not even labeling it writing sometimes, because then they probably go, oh.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Myers, and thank you, Carly.
Yeah.
How about any other questions before we get going? Or comments? We're open for comments as well. If you thought this was helpful, you'd like to see more of this or an expansion of the topic, let us know. We'd love to hear from you and be able to add those classes for the fall. We're going to be continuing our parent education via Zoom. And so we want to make sure that we have the right topics for everyone. So, please feel free to chime in if there's something that you'd like to get some more information on. Okay, well, with that, I'd like to thank Carly for her presentation, and I'd like to thank all of you. We do this for you. We want to make sure that we provide you tools and strategies so that you can best support your students, and we thank you for the opportunity to support your students. With that, this presentation will be up in about 1 day on our NVUSD channel. The links that Carly went over are embedded into the presentation, so that will be up as well. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us. So thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your engagement as well. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you so much. Thank you, Carly.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you.